What people don't talk about enough is that the person you are dating is not just going to be your future husband, but the future father to your children. And if you don't choose the right kind of person who is going to be a great father, you are in for a harsh wake-up call when you have kids. I say that thankfully, not from because I've experienced that, but because of the opposite. Because every single day, I'm not exaggerating, every single day of being a mom. We're 6 months in now to this journey, and funny enough, the timing of this is, as of recording this, it's gonna be Father's Day this coming weekend, so this is very top of mind. But despite being Father's Day, like before that, ever since I was pregnant over a year ago, I think about this all the time, and especially now every day as a parent, just seeing how my husband interacts with our baby and how he helps me and how he shows up and how we do life together and how we enjoy each other and we're like best friends and all these things. And every single day I'm like, thank you, Lord. Thank you that you, through various circumstances and honestly challenges growing up, just seeing so many broken relationships all around me, I just cemented in my mind, like, I need to wait for a guy who will be a really good husband and of course father. But it was kind of like more faint in my mind because you don't really know what it's like to be a parent and you don't hear the realities enough from people, which is all about why I make my videos, is to share with people their realities so that you come in more informed, because that really helped me when I was single to hear about the realities of marriage. Because otherwise you just see all these glossy photos on the internet in Disney movies and Hollywood portrayals and you're like, oh, it's like so romantic and sweet and rosy, and not enough people share like the realities of the challenges, because that's actually what informs you the best about, okay, what do I need to then do to prepare myself to not be overtaken by the waves, if that makes sense. Like, if you learn about waves and tides, you can learn how to surf better. I've never surfed, but I can imagine like that's an analogy that probably works. My husband, when I was dating him, one of the top qualities I saw in him, it wasn't the money he made, it wasn't his education, it wasn't his job. I think all these things, the world, especially as Asian Americans, a lot of the values of parents, especially if they're not believers, are very surface level, or even they're not even surface level, but maybe like medium level in terms of how they are in their personality, maybe like, work ethic and being able to provide and all these things. Yeah, that is good. That is great. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think there's different levels, but at the core of it, you really have to look at their heart. It will come out through how they act and how they respond in tough situations. During the pandemic, my husband and I, we were still dating at that point. So we were living with housemates separately, like a few miles apart. But at the peak of the pandemic, we were living in the strictest county in the whole country in terms of the lockdown procedures, the masking and all that. Everyone was confused and didn't know what to do because it sounded like very contagious and no one wanted to get it, and it was still brand new. So I mean, we had dated long distance before that, finally closed the gap and we're dating in the same place. But then because of the pandemic, we were suddenly separated again. I remember feeling so overwhelmed by the pandemic, the fear and anxiety around it in the news, everyone's fear, and I was just like really getting in my head. But on top of that, I was also like, what about our relationship? Like, how are things gonna work out and pan out in terms of our relationship? And so I was just in like an emotional mess because I missed seeing him, and I had all these like assumptions and beliefs, subconscious beliefs I had that placed expectations on him that were unrealistic, and he didn't know what I was thinking either. So this was many years ago, and way back then I was still working through therapy with a lot of this stuff. But anyway, I was just like breaking down, sobbing, thinking to myself, if he really cared, he would like show up for me, blah blah. But we're in the freaking pandemic and it was lockdown and everyone was confused about what to do, and he also wanted to respect the wishes of his housemates, who didn't want him to go places. So I don't know, there was just so many factors objectively, but when you're in the thick of things and emotionally, it was a lot. And I just remember thinking to myself like, oh, it's not gonna work out. Like, he doesn't really love me, he doesn't really care. This was all like, I knew it was too good to be true. And I was like just spiraling. Back then, before I knew how to take my thoughts captive, I would just spiral. One negative thought would lead to another, it would get worse and worse and worse, and it would be like doom and gloom. He had no idea that I was feeling those ways until I communicated it. And then he actually did come. I can't remember all the details of if he told his housemates or not. Maybe he explained, we're going through something really difficult right now and she needs me. I don't remember, but I just remember he came over and just held me as I sobbed. Again, I was like, maybe you don't know, maybe you don't really love me. It was hard, I remember, but he just sat there and hugged me and watched me cry my eyes out in a mess, and he accepted me. Just him being present and embracing me as I was told me everything I needed to know about, oh my goodness, he is so safe. When I was deciding whether or not to pursue a relationship with my husband, back then we were long distance. I was living in Australia, he was in California, and I remember praying and asking God when he told me his feelings for me, and I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I remember praying, and I was so surprised because the words I felt God give to me was, he's safe. I thought he would say, yes, date him, or yes, it's all gonna work out, or yes, he's your husband. You know, all these things that would have given me confirmation, certainty about the future. But instead, he said, he's safe. And that really intrigued me. That was about 7, maybe 8 years ago. Since that day, I continually look back and I was like, wow, one of the best qualities you can look for in a future husband, a future father of your children, is emotional safety. Safety to be yourself, to be accepted in your mess, to have that compassion and empathy that so many people lack these days because everyone's very prideful and egotistical and trying to like put up a front and look like they have everything together and also judge you right away and make assumptions and cancel each other and be divided. He was so humble, like, oh wow, tell me how you're feeling, and then not be defensive about it right away if it involves him, not try to like overlook your pain or try to solve your struggles, you know. He's just like listening, being like, I understand, I get it, it's hard. And that empathy healed me, honestly, because my whole life I had been taught and conditioned to please people and perform, and I need to be a certain way so that people don't get set off and triggered and defensive, and people just tell me to, you know, it's not that bad and I shouldn't complain, or it's bad to cry, you know, all these things. Honestly, dating my husband and now being married and now being parents with him, it's so clear. This book I listened to in college talked about this. It's called You and Me Forever, Marriage and Light of Eternity by Francis and Lisa Chan. I listened to this audiobook because I was like, I want to know about how to prepare myself for a godly family and marriage that I desire, you know, after becoming a Christian. And the more I grew in my faith, the more I saw examples of this in my own life, and I was like, wow, that is really amazing. I want that. How do I set myself up for success in that way? The book takeaway was the best trait that any husband could have is humility, or wife too, for that matter, if you're watching this and you're a guy. But I think for a lot of girls, especially a lot of women, we are taught and conditioned, like it's their status, it's their careers, their money, how much real estate, how much investment, like, I don't know, just worldly success, like all these external success. And again, even personality traits like work ethic, humor, and like all these things, those are nice, but at the core of it is the heart and the character of, do you have the humility to admit when you're wrong, or to face your own humanity and to actually do something about it, rather than try to cover it up or try to escape from it and run away from it or make excuses. I honestly think that makes or breaks not just a relationship and not just your parenthood journey, but your individual growth as a person. Because when you face the inevitable struggles and challenges of life, you will either be like, oh my gosh, this scares me because it shows me how weak I am and how incapable I am, and I want to run away and like do something else to cope. Or you can be like, oh wow, this is hard. What is this revealing about myself that I need to grow in? It's a different way to respond to the reflection that you see in the mirror when you see something that is off. It's like, okay, let me just not look at the mirror then, or let me like look at a different mirror that will give me a picture that I want. Or you can look at the real mirror and be like, what is that? Let me do something about that. How this shows up in parenthood now is actually, I'll talk about pregnancy. You know, just my first trimester was so hard. I was just like here laying on this sofa like most of the day. I was so exhausted and nauseous all the time. And I just felt like so guilty, like being a potato and being like, I can't do anything. But he really picked it up and he did the dishes, he did the chores, he cooked. You know, usually I would do most of the cooking, but he really stepped up, and I was like, oh, thank God for a husband who like isn't just enabling himself to veg out and rely on me and be like, why can't you do these things, right? You know, he would always be helping me like put my shoes on and making sure I'm stable and running errands that I need and taking me to doctor's appointments and being just a servant leader, servant husband. Unfortunately, nowadays our standards are so low and we settle for being adult children ourselves and not working on ourselves to grow up, and then also settling for that in our partners and our future partners. Anyway, how it really showed up was in birth. As a birth partner, he was so supportive. I'll share more about about this in a separate video about our birth story, which I still have to do 6 months later. I still haven't done it. It's just a lot. And especially in postpartum, I was just like bawling my eyes out because I was so dissociated, so disconnected from myself in the thick of the fog and just feeling like a crazy person. I never imagined that I could be on the brink of insanity until having a baby. And then my husband's response, instead of like, what's wrong with you? Or instead of being freaked out and scared of that, he really leaned in and he just hugged me and held me, told me I was beautiful. And I would like bawl my eyes out because I felt anything but beautiful. I felt like I'm such a mess. I still have a postpartum belly and stretch marks. I'm having trouble feeding my baby and breastfeeding and the latch and sleeping, and everything was just like crazy. And I don't know how to take care of a baby. And he just was like, you're a great mom. You're doing so great. Every mom goes through this. Just like, oh, just looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's amazing. And then even now, 6 months later, just yesterday, like I was doing dishes and he was like coming out to help feed our baby because we are in a very unique season right now where he can be home as well, which is such a blessing in disguise, I would say, because he's been able to help out more with our baby and he's feeding our baby and he just tells, you're beautiful. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Or he'll tell me, I love you and I'm grateful for you. It's so natural for us to like say these things. The Gottman Institute, they talk about these positive deposits. We have a lot of those because we started that habit ever since we were dating. And when we got into marriage and we learned more about that too, we really worked on doing that even more intentionally. And now it's just habit. We don't even think about it. We just like deposit positive things into each other to encourage each other and show appreciation and show gratitude and show love and affection. And those things really, going back to what I was saying, stems from humility. Because if you don't have the humility to want to learn and grow as a better husband, as a better father, or for you, if you're watching this and you're a woman, as a better future wife, future mother, you will feel frustrated constantly about why are you stuck in the same problems over and over again? Why can't the other person change when so much of it is about both sides and meeting each other where you're at and having the humility to realize that you're part of the problem and you're part of the solution. There are some things that you just can't control. You can't control people, you can't control outcomes. And so you really have to think about what inside of me can I shift, the mindset shifts, the perspectives. What am I holding on to internally that needs to be surrendered, that needs to be let go? What do I need to pray for and seek help for? And so many things. And it all comes down to humility. I just can't emphasize enough this trait, not feeling like you need to have a front, which is hard because in our day and age, that's what we're sold and taught is to do. But the other side of humility, and what I alluded to earlier, is it also creates a safety to just be yourself because you're not feeling like you need to walk on eggshells or like be a certain way for that other person to love you and to earn their approval or their love. If they don't have humility to work on themselves, they also will be triggered and emotionally unstable, and they don't know how to get out of that loop. They don't know how to seek help to get out of that. So then you also feel like you can't share things openly and safely. So it just really, it ties in with everything, and it makes all the difference in life, not just in parenthood or marriage, but in life. I just felt like I had to say that because not enough people realize the implications of this quality, and it is so true, more true as you grow older and go through life and realize the realities of the challenges that people don't share with you until you hear about them and you're like, oh wow, never thought about it from that perspective. People say biggest points of contention that lead to divorce are arguments about money and sex. Again, learning to humble yourself to talk about these things without all the emotions, because it's so hard. Money is emotional, sex is emotional. If you don't have the humility to learn the skill of how to talk about, that is also going to create so much friction and just butting heads. But instead of butting heads, humility is a secret ingredient to help you come together and be like, how do we work this out as a team, given our differences, given our different backgrounds and experiences and perspectives? How do I empathize with you and also recognize what is it in me that I also need to change and also need to admit that I'm wrong in as well, because none of us are perfect. The reason why I talked about money is because money becomes even more contentious and difficult to figure out and talk about after you have kids because of the expenses that come with having kids and all the decisions that you have to make about what to spend on, invest in, what to choose for education, for feeding, for sleeping, for the bottles, the diapers, the clothes, toys, books, strollers, car car seats, childcare potentially, you know, so many decisions. If you don't iron that out beforehand, it gets increasingly hard with kids, and the more complex your life gets, basically, with money in the picture, inevitably. You can watch my video about baby proofing your marriage for more details about what that looks like in marriage after having a baby and how we also have worked through it ourselves. I just think about this constantly, about like, thank you, Lord, for my husband. Thank you, Lord, that you gave me this foresight beforehand to not settle for someone who might be impressive on paper, but at the core of his heart, he is full of pride, or has walls around his heart, which is really, really difficult, I think, to deal with. And our baby is going to grow up so emotionally seen and heard and loved. I mean, she already is. She like adores him. She's enamored by him. She always stares at him and just smiles and reaches for him. And it's just the most precious thing. They have the best bond and connection. Follow along for more realistic first-time motherhood reflections and experiences and lessons I'm learning along the way. And I will catch you guys in the next one.